And we're live. Is this thing working? Yay! Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Cecily Armstrong. I'm going to adjust this thing. So, is everybody enjoying Digital Hollywood? Yes. Let's have a round of applause for Victor Harwood, even though he's not here. He'll like that when he watches this, right? So thank you all for coming. I'm very excited to have this stellar panel here. Unfortunately, Kevin Attari is not joining us today. His travel plans changed that, but nonetheless, we have an incredible panel. I'll give you 2 seconds on me. And you can read everybody's bios, of course, on the website and in your program, so I don't want to spend a great deal of time on that. We'll have everybody say a line or two about themselves, but because I really want to get to the crux of the subject here, and then we're going to do ample time for Q&A. So as we're moving along, start thinking about some questions, jot them down, so we can have a really interactive experience here. So in any case, I am a content creator for many years, too long than I can remember sometimes. Carissa and I were just talking about that. Across multiple platforms, lived and worked in New York and Los Angeles for about 25 years. I moved back to my home area of Texas. Bonnie Trevino in the house. We actually grew up together, which is great. You've seen her on many television shows here and lives in Los Angeles. But in any case, I'm working in San Antonio, Austin area now, which is a really exciting time and growth. So have 1 foot in that area, 1 foot in New York, and 1 foot in LA. And of course, I'm here today. What an exciting time this is to be alive and working in our industry. And I think we need to all remember that, because we're going to be looking back over the next couple of years and say, wow, we can't even believe how quickly things are happening. So these experts that we have here today are the ones that are shaping and forming the growth of our industry, particularly as it comes down to producing for television and film. Those are different processes, but we're going to touch on both of them today, and also how they overlap and really aren't mutually exclusive at this point, and also about how it's all about the audience. So speaking of that, show of hands, how many we have here that are content creators? And you can raise your hand more than once. How many are on the tech side? Okay. And finance, business affairs folks? Okay, everybody go ask them for money after that.
Yes.
Advertising and marketing? So isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting how we're overlapping here throughout all these industries? It's a great time to be an expert at something, but then also to play well with others. So having said that, let's go right down the line here. I'm going to have each of our panelists introduce themselves and give a couple lines about your company and what you do.
Sure. First, I'm a geek about content and brands, so it's great to see a lot of people out here. I also agree with Cecily. It's a fascinating time to be in the industry. I've been in it in all facets, from early stage as an actor, and then moving on into post-production and technology, and then on into marketing and content creation. So I think this is seriously the most fascinating time to be in it, and I know we'll get in, dig into that. So I have a company called Black Box Creative Group. We're a digital marketing and advertising agency. We were founded in 2010, and we work with all the major studios and streaming companies. And for our company right now, we have a bunch of geeks in our company. I think that's what drives the culture of our company and the content that we work on. We kind of navigate. It's almost like the people in our company help us steer towards the actual clients we like to work with, and I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more than that. But I'm grateful to be here and excited to be with Cecily and my panelists, so thank you very much.
Everybody welcome Frank Donner. Charles.
Hi, I'm Chuck Deloclis. I'm the owner of DME, Deloclis Media, and for years, we've been a content creation company. About thousands of hours for pretty much every cable and broadcast network. About 5 years ago, made the jump into working directly with brands. And over the last 5 or 6 years, I've worked cross-platform with everybody from Anheuser-Busch to SeaWorld on down to Sears and Kmart. And it's been amazing to see the crossover. Every single day now, a different brand or somebody representing the brand will reach out and say, how on earth do we get ourselves into the business the way that you do it now? And there are a lot of brokers and there are a lot of agencies that do it, but there aren't a lot of individuals that do it. And we found that the brands are really attracted to being able to sit down and say, hey, maybe you can be on this network, or maybe you can be on that network, and work them in really nicely to it without being a product integration guy. It's really letting the brand pay for something without the audience knowing it.
Everybody, please welcome Chuck. And Caressa?
Chuck, I didn't know this about you. So I'm Caressa, and I'm a product integration gal. And so
I'm so happy they're sitting next to each other.
So in all seriousness, I've spent 2 decades in the space of product placement. It's evolved into different terminology, but at the end of the day, it's about drafting off of an opportunity with a creator that makes sense for both sides to create compelling entertainment. So our agency was Norm Marshall and Associates. Norm sold to Bill Gates a few years back, about 6 years ago. And the purpose of that was that he recognized there was an opportunity for brands to have a bigger play in being in content, and he saw the need there, and also the need for the technology to make that possible, as well as the data. So we'll go into a little bit about that, what we do. But we work across verticals, so we work in film, TV, music videos, celebrity, digital influencer, and our primary job is to integrate with existing IP.
And there's room in the sandbox for all.
I know that.
Everybody, welcome Caressa.
Good afternoon. My name is George Leon, and I am the Chief Strategy Officer for Hawthorne, an advertising agency here in Los Angeles. We specialize in the creation and delivery of branded creative across all channels. And in particular, we specialize in the analytics behind the audience measurement. And one of the things that I have found interesting, and particularly as a result of, also in light of the broadcast upfronts last week and the emphasis around total audience measurement and the impact that we now have to look at audience and delivery beyond just that first view. Branded entertainment and branded content is certainly a channel that we have to bring to all of our brands. And so I'm excited to be able to share that with this panel.
Thank you, everybody. Welcome, George. Darnell?
Hi, everyone. My name's Darnell Briscoe, and I'm a VP of Account at Fullscreen. I lead our entertainment group there. Before that, I was in part of McBeard Media, which was a social media agency. We joined Fullscreen about 3 years ago. We grew that team from 3 of us to a 250-person social media agency that focuses across entertainment and brands. But for me and for our team, really we've tried to find we've tried to look at the future of marketing and try to understand the way that people consume, and the way that social has been an avenue for that. And so over the last 10 years, we've done over 500 social campaigns across movies, television, and streaming, including Star Wars, Deadpool, the NBA, and Pretty Little Liars.
And welcome, Darnell. And Mike, you're up.
So I'm Mike Cabrali. I'm the Chief Creative Officer at ArcLight Films, a production, finance, and sales company that focuses on international co-productions, feature films.
Thank you. Welcome, Mike. And so I'm representing 2 companies here today that are based in the San Antonio area. One is called Quarter Moon Productions. We currently have 9 shows that are from live sports to scripted and unscripted, short form, long form. And one of those is called YOLO Texas, as in You Only Live Once, which is a travel and entertainment show that I'm the EP on. It's a weekly show. We're cleared in 91% of the state of Texas, which is big. It's 12.5 million households on first run on linear, and then we, of course, push to digital. So it's a pretty pretty fun job right now, and it's fun to be back home in that region. We just shot a whole show in Southern California, so that was exciting. Also for Noisy Trumpet Digital, which is a company that promotes everything that Quarter Moon Productions does and is a part of the PM Group, which is a 30-year-old and the largest ad agency in that region of Texas. So we're sort of bringing our wares to both coasts at this point. And something we're talking about a lot within our organization is what comes first. Is it the brand or the audience? And who is the real client? So who wants to jump in on this one?
Well, I think all of us are probably going to say the same thing, right?
Well, I don't know. What are you going to say?
Well, I was gonna say,
I'm with it. You can go first.
it's hard to predict. I have a master's in oversharing, so
Chicken and the
and
egg.
a doctorate in being inappropriate sometimes. So
No, then I'm going to back off.
there you go. No, I mean I think we all are going to say it's about entertainment.
Right.
So and for us, because we are working with existing content, shows and films that all of us watch and tune into, we we approach that partnership with reverence, as well as brands that we work with, which are huge sterling brands like Microsoft and General Motors. And so when both are not compromising, and you're always thinking of the end result, actually, I mean, that's our guiding principle. What is the end result going to look like? Then it's not compromising, and it's about the audience for us.
Yeah, I would agree. I was thinking about this as you posed the question, and for a lot of our, our team, they're sort of the fans and the audience, our staff at our company, and so when I think about the, what we're doing, and we're transitioning our business. It used to be, one form or another. Now it's sort of we're a business to fan. So I believe it's always about the audience and starting there, and they want the storytellers they want, and then the brand is a big part of that. But I would agree with you.
On our end, I mean, a lot of times what I've discovered is that brands do have a message. And if the story that you tell fits with the brand's message, it's super seamless. And more brands are understanding what their story is, what their message is. And our job, I think, more often than not, is to be able to fine-tune and to be able to direct the story so it fits the brand's message without being head-on.
What I find interesting is that from an advertising perspective, it's like we do look at the brand first, but we look at it from that perspective in the lens of what is the story, who is their audience first and foremost, and then align that story and where they're going to receive that messaging. So whereas the entertainment is the core of it, it's for us from the advertising perspective is understanding that brand, who their audience is, and how we're going to tell that story.
Would you say it used to be a little bit different, that people were starting more from the brand perspective and not so thinking about the audience, and now that things are becoming much more micro and we're really, obviously with data and analytics, we're getting more honed in on the tribe?
We are.
Yeah.
We are, in fact. As a matter of fact, that wall is being reduced. It's
Yeah.
like it's more of that story and that content, and certainly that engagement ultimately, wherever that engagement is.
Yeah. The other big factor too is that there's just so much more content. There's so much more choice, and there's the ability for the consumer to find whatever they want, wherever they want, and consume it however they want. And so it's more important to not be so disruptive, which was, I think, it maybe a past tactic that you could get away with, and now being more additive, finding ways to contribute, and finding ways to actually add value to the audience.
Yeah.
And Mike, from a film process perspective, whether it's indie or tentpole or what, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like there's a bell curve happening where you've got tentpole at the top, got indie at the bottom, and then there's this whole big space in the middle that's for quality film, but that can also be a short form series on a SVOD platform. So from that process of filmmaking, are you thinking more about the audience ultimately now than before?
Well, I mean, we're a market-driven company, so we're making films that are designed to travel and work internationally. I would say I think it's a huge opportunity right now on both sides. I mean, I think I just got back from Cannes, and I have to say, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, somebody said, television is the new independent film. And the most interesting work is being done in television, which is and we're not in the television space yet. So
how'd that make you feel?
Well, it's what I think it's. I think it's exciting because I think there used to be a stigma about going back and forth, and film actors, and that's become the biggest challenge for me, is that there was a time where there were actors that worked in film, there were actors that worked in television. Those lines are gone. Now you have directors and actors and talent kind of crossing all platforms, and you have huge talent now that are like, how do I get into social media? How do I use YouTube to build my brand, to build my profile? So for us, it is starting with the market of what works, and I think that's a big problem that I find with younger producers who are incredibly passionate. And I was an independent producer before being at ArcLight, and I kind of grew up in big movies. So I've had a sampling of all of this, but I think it's an issue where a lot of younger producers don't think of who the film is for. They're in love with the story and they're trying to will this into existence, which you have to do as a producer. But at the same time, you got to know who your audience is, and you got to know what movie you're telling, and you got to know what your destination is to get there. I'm excited because I think that what's happened on the studio side, where they're making half as many films and everything, these are brand managers now. The studios are brand managers. They're not making films in the same way. So when I look at the movies that I grew up with as a kid, and my mom's a cinephile, so I used to go to the movies a lot. The fact that Manhattan or Midnight Cowboy, these like really that now would be seen as very hardcore art house films. Those are studio films back then.
Right,
so that's
right.
what I think is interesting, is that it's given opportunity to the independents to fill the void of studio films, of interesting, challenging films that are not being made by the studios, and and are kind of outside of the box.
And this is for the whole panel. Do you think the audience cares? Do you think the audience cares anymore, whether it's a branded, owned, it's a Warner Brothers film, or it's does that matter? And from the television point of view, is there the same level of interest and affinity that, I know if I turn on CBS, it's going to be something good? Or do they just care about the content they're consuming and the subject matter?
I think Darnell brought up, there's so much content out there and it's getting so focused. I still think brands like a major studio do represent some certain quality, and so people would go to that, so I wouldn't move away from that, but I do think we're seeing the rise of many more content creators, and Netflix is blasting through, and Amazon and Hulu. So I still think there's some something warranted to the brand of a studio that still gives off quality content that people will go to, if that's what you're asking.
Well, I'm wondering, what level of importance is it to the consumer?
I would say it's still important. It's just that kind of big household brand names don't necessarily get a free pass anymore.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Although
Yeah.
I do think it's interesting, though, that the perception, which was conditioned from early on, from Netflix, is that I tune in every time, like I'm gonna get a kick-ass series, and I give it 3 minutes,
Yeah.
and I'm like, but I do think there is something about Netflix, because they came out with such great quality from the onset. I
Yep.
mean, first impressions, lasting impressions, so it did condition us that way. So I do think they've done a good job at that. Similar to HBO, they followed that same HBO pattern path.
Yeah,
You know,
really,
investing
but I
in
think
quality filmmakers.
I mean, Netflix is so unique. I've only produced one documentary, and I sold it to Red Envelope, which was their theatrical division, back when Netflix had a theatrical division. And what was fascinating in that exposure to Netflix early days is their algorithm was the key. They not only, back in the day, you would rank you'd rate a film 1 to 5 stars. Well, their algorithm didn't just connect you with the other people that rated that film with 5 stars. It also connected you with the people that were rating the other film that you rated 1 star. Other people that rated that film 1 star. So it wasn't like Amazon, which was people who bought this also bought this. It was so much more accurate. So when Netflix recommends a series to us, it's in such an informed way, and it's so specific to our taste because they have so much information on what we're watching.
Well, let's talk about, and I think we can all jump in here. Let's talk about data.
Yeah.
And is it squelching? Is it squelching the process of on the creative side, creativity? I mean, when you're looking at a lot of what Mike's talking about is audience segmentation versus fragmentation, and creating for that specific segment. To
Well,
connect from
I
an
think I would-
advertiser's point of view, that's really important.
It
but
is.
It
It
used
is,
to be.
Jump in.
It used to be focus groups. You know, you would do
Yeah.
your show, and you would sit down, and it was that two-way glass that was just a nightmare. And you would watch these people rip apart your show. Because they always do, because they're in a focus group, and they like to do that. Focus groups are still important, I think, to some of the niche networks, some of the more cable networks, and who are hyper-directed if you're dealing with an animal-type show or Animal Planet or those. But data has changed the world. Real data has changed the world. Digital data has changed the world. The algorithms have changed the world. Yeah, focus groups still exist, but this is now a real-time, real-life, ever-changing, super hyper-focused group that I think is...
I would add to that as Darnell pointed out, there's a lot of content, a lot of channels out there, and I think what has really has reduced that wall between the major studios and the smaller studios, also between it's like film and television, is that the viewer now is at the helm.
Right, they're in
of-
control.
They're in
Yeah,
control
yeah.
of what they want to see, when they want to see, how they want to see it.
They're
So-
programmers.
So that data, they are. It's like that data is there so that we don't have to rely on any one single channel now to be able to find that audience. Just as in the past, we used to rely heavily, it's like on major broadcast network airings to create that reach and frequency. Now all you have to do is just deliver that message and they will find it. And I think that's what we're finding also from an entertainment perspective. It's that audience that's driving. It's like how they want to see it. It's like, and also the audience measurement behind it. And it's creating efficiencies, certainly from our perspective on the advertising side. Understanding where they're watching, when they're watching, allows us to then be able to negotiate efficiently. It's
Yeah,
like
I think
targeting
from-
that audience.
Yeah, from the agency perspective, and you were saying, is it squelching the creativity?
Right, right.
I mean, we always see technologies, we're always shifting into a new landscape, and certainly in our business, it's shifting sands all the time, something new, something aggressive, and the term now for agency is data-driven creative. Are we going in that direction? And certainly we use data to the nth degree, data and analytics.
It's what we use.
Right. So, 8 years ago, I had programmers and developers, I had designers, now I have data analysts, I have community managers, social, it's completely changing landscape. So for me, I still do think that creative is first and foremost in the storytelling process, and we're content creators, we're creative people, we want that part of it. Certainly we use it to the extent that's necessary. Sometimes I feel that certain brands will say, or a person at a certain level that needs to get it up to their boss to say, hey, is it working? And they're like, of course it's working. Look at the data, and like it's spiking. And so they want to have that authority because it's still a game. We could say, hey, that YouTube that went viral, we're going to recreate it with data. I don't think that's quite going to happen yet,
Yeah.
right? You can't do it. It's not going to happen. Lots of
Darnell's
people are
laughing
trying.
at you.
Well, lots of people are trying. There's great companies like Jukin that do some really interesting thing with user-generated content, and they have their way of watching a spike. If anybody was at the social panel, I wanted to kind of just clip one thing when it goes back to brands and audience. It was talking about, the person said to, hey, social influencer, you only have 13,000 followers. How are people and brands coming to you? You should have 1 million followers. And then someone piped up and said, here's the reason why. It's because Nike wants to use me because I'm segmented, I'm focused, I'm a
That's
tribe.
right, yeah.
The person that has 1 million followers, they're looking good, they're big, but they're not really focused. So it still comes around that. So I think, data is important, but it's how you use it.
Well, so, do you want to finish your thought?
Just a
Or
quick
no?
thought. It's the equivalency of what we utilize. It's like from a audience measurement perspective, good reach versus bad reach.
Yeah, great.
Yeah,
Good point.
yeah.
So for us in the space of product placement, it really kicked off awareness after ET. It's like the most notorious and quoted example of product placement. But from that point on, it's really been prevalent primarily in film and then TV in the 90s and cable and the proliferation of streaming. But what we never had was data.
Yep.
So our clients would ask us, like, so how did it go? And we're like, well, according to Nielsen, you take a media value cut in half, and this many people saw it on Seinfeld, and that was it. So you could talk about reach and awareness, but not about efficacy and call to action. So for us, with the advent of the data that was available through streaming, we can now tap in and say, be true with, we have 7 data providers, third-party data providers, that can actually say, this is who saw it, and this was the actual makeup of it, but it's really changing the fabric of what we do. And then, conversely, our brands and the advertisers have an expectation, too, of understanding that same data. So my point is, and also about the point about efficiency, last year there were 572 original TV series. That was last year. Just series, not episodes. And so going forward in the coming year, we have an additional, I don't know, 10 billion or something from Apple and Netflix and Amazon. And so where is the client to go and where are they to invest their dollars? So we really have amped up our data arm so we can help give them in that direction. But once the strategy is developed and that fuels that, then you kind of have to go with your gut. I mean, you have creators in here. I sit sometimes in writers' rooms, or you're on set and you see it, you feel it, you hear it, and you know the nuances, and that goes really far too. And so if you have the right partner as a brand who has that connectivity and can have the real truth, I mean, you can't put a number to that. If we were to go out to brands 2 years ago and say, hey, so I got this series, it's set in 1982, there is no one you know other than Winona, yeah, she's back, she has to pay some bills off, I know she was stealing, and yeah, so she's back, and she drives a Pinto, and this is great, and there's aliens, and they harm the kids, it's gonna be great. I don't think any brands would do that. So,
right.
you know, they have to trust us and the partners, so when we say, hey, this is going to be a kick-ass show, do it, your partner, they trust us. So data gets you to one point, but then the nuances and the experience goes.
If I could just say one thing, the word trust is, as a content creator, it's about being able to speak, whether you're talking to a CMO, a CEO, a brand manager, it's about being able to speak to them from an authentic place, explaining to them the why, not just the. And when you sit down and you have that moment with them and you explain, and you're not being precious about what you do, because if you start getting precious, my experience is they're going to read into it. But if you're authentic about why you think it's going to help them, that's going to build trust. And once that happens, the whole paradigm shifts.
And you have to mean what you say and do what you say too. So the tactics of it and coming and producers, there's producers in here. You have so much that's going on. You can have a brand or a partner say they're going to do something, but when push comes to shove, it's a 5 a.m. call time. You better have everything there, and you better have it camera ready and shooting. And so to have, that's a big part of it too, because they don't need brands. Like, the shows that brands want, they don't need us.
We're saying that the audience is so smart now, but also the brands are so smart now. So that means the clients are so smart now. And the brand is the client, is the audience, is the creator. It's sort of so your companies, in their various expertise, are also sort of the ambassadors, the gatekeepers, those trusted voices and sources. That's the mortar for the bricks, let's say. So from a conversational point of view, I'd love for Darnell to talk a little bit about this. Communicating from the brand perspective through social media, through maybe creating a short form series around a longer format, from the lead-in promotional side, from the visuals, everything that's happening. About those conversations that start early on, aren't you then sort of making a sea change here on what the perspective of that brand's delivery is going to be? It's like turning a big ship in the middle of the ocean. Am I right?
Yeah. I mean, part of that is there's a few different things, but a big component of that depends on like how real time you actually can shift. There are projects and programs that we work on where we're pulling together weekly reports for the writers' room, and they are looking at the way that a certain relationship or a certain storyline or a certain character is resonating, and using that to help determine which way the narrative will ultimately go for that season. But sometimes things are already in the can, and there's not really anything you can do about it. But at the end of the day, I think there's an expectation now from fans to be heard. There's too many mediums and too many opportunities for them to share their voice. And for them to be completely ignored, I think is a mistake and is dangerous to some degree. And so, and on the flip side of that, there are a lot of, I think, early opportunities and ways that you can use data, that you can use conversation to help inform where you end up putting your eggs, where you end up pivoting early. I think about the work that we did on the very first Deadpool campaign, and a lot of the early conversation there was around will they be true to this character? One of the things that I feel like is so true of fandoms: the smaller they are, the more precious and intense they are about getting it right. And that audience knew that traditionally studios had made more money by making a PG-13 movie, not a rated R film. And that was early conversation that we saw. That was early conversation that we bubbled up, and that was early conversation that 20th Century Fox, our partners at Fox, took seriously and worked alongside us to find interesting ways to make sure that we could deliver on that and meet fans' expectations and get them on board early, so that they were excited and that they felt like the thing that they loved was in good hands and that they could trust it. And so that ended up turning into an April Fool's announcement as an early date that got identified as a good way to go out to the world. There was a lot of intentional dumpster fires started beforehand, and rumors with digital press that it was going to be PG-13, so that you would get a lot of conversation, you'd get some angst, you'd get kind of that momentum and energy, so that when you had that payoff, that when Ryan Reynolds kills Mario Lopez and announces that it's rated R on Access Hollywood, the fans cheered and were ready to go along for the ride.
Right. So, Frank, you want to talk a little bit about fandom?
Yeah, some of the things we were talking about earlier, getting back to our office and what we do, our talent, our team. We're always trying to do the best for our clients and bring everything that we can from their perspective. So it's interesting, the type of talent that we're looking at our company really informs and I mentioned this earlier, the types of programs we're working on. So we're actually reaching out. If you look into our, like if you ever came to Black Box, we have our copywriters. I think 4 of them are stand-up comedians. We have geeks that are working on DC Comics. I mean, they know every aspect of the comic book. They know the writers. They know the artists. So from a fan perspective, and taking care of our brands, we're now looking and engaging the very talent that's going to help be the audience and then drive the creative for our clients. So it's changed our environment. I mean, when we started the agency back in 2009, 2010, we weren't thinking this way at all. And now we're really looking at and focusing at the type of people we bring in to enhance the creative for our clients.
So ultimately, it is, of course, about storytelling, and I'd like to think that's all that matters, but I don't live in a fantasy world. So, but I know you all agree that creative and storytelling is the most important thing. At this conference, as also in the conference in New York, there's so much information and really deep dives on what's happening in VR, AR, and so on. So how does that impact the storytelling and your different formats? Are you now, from a producing point of view, thinking about, somebody's going to be sitting there with a headset on? Or are they really going to interact? Or are they just going to take that headset off and then my storytelling's gone? Are those devices and those experiences now becoming an important part of your storytelling and your production process? No?
Well, I mean, for us, we don't create content, so we're specialists in integrating in existing content. So I can speak from what our brands demand and ask. They're not at this point demanding VR or AR, investing their dollars in that space, mostly because they feel that the audience isn't there yet, right? So they understand it will be there, but right now it's not there. Where they do see their audience moving, which there was a an Ipsos study that cited like 95% of marketers felt their audience was moving to SVOD. So that's where a lot of our brands are moving their dollars. So the ability in streaming platforms that are subscription based is that the storytellers are not controlled by advertisers. So the story can be better. So I feel like for us, a lot of our brands, we have more opportunity with this new technology of streaming platforms than we do in working with ad-supported networks. And I'm not saying anything bad about ad-supported or making a statement about the decline, because I believe it's an and world. It's not an or world. There will always be, it's connecting where the different opportunities are. So we do work on all of those. But the advent of streaming and skip through really changed our entire business. Because now it's about being in the content instead of surrounding it. So that's what helped us.
We just did a 1 hour primetime game show for a brand, and it went on a cable network, and it did quite well. But when we built the show, we built it into very, very segmented short bits that got married together by hosts. We did that so that we could dismantle the show, and we could then take these 2-minute, completely absurd game show moments and feed them out digitally. And we got a lot of views.
And they're really funny.
They were funny.
Yeah.
They were funny.
Yeah.
But it gave the brand a double dip. It gave them a bigger bang for their buck. So, to answer your question on AR and VR, someday it'll be there. I don't know that a lot of people are asking for it right now unless it's a novelty. There are some brands that are really immersive, more when it's a standalone, unique, experiential moment as opposed to you got to get this and watch that.
Well, what I'm hearing at the conference and the other panels I've been listening to is they're at the point now where they need the content. So the technology's there. The price point has come down. We're now looking at around $200, so guess what's going to be under everybody's Christmas tree? So where's the content coming from?
I think it's a lot different, like when 3D came into the scene. I mean, obviously had 3D around for a very long time, and it hit the from a more marketing aspect. But I think both for almost every pitch that we put out, there's a VR component, an AR component. There's an artificial intelligence with bots component for creating content, obviously for the marketing purposes, not for original, but it's always in it. I think seemingly right now, although VR is out there, AR, augmented reality, is making a big push. We're using that for quite a few movies right now that we're working on, and we have quite a few partners in that. There's a lot of artificial intelligence usage right now with bots. We're using that a lot. So there's certainly a play for it in our world, absolutely.
Darnell?
When it comes to, from a marketing standpoint, when it comes to AR or VR or really any other format, I think all of those things have to be siphoned through the lens and really just the paradigm shift that consumers want to tell their own story, and they want to tell something about themselves. And so whatever it is, if it's AR and it allows them to say something about themselves, it allows them to find some connection point. If it's VR, if it's whatever, you look at the recent explosion of experiential, and why did people go to the Museum of Ice Cream? Not because people love ice cream. People love ice cream, sure, but it's because people wanted to tell something about themselves. They wanted to say to the world, this is what I'm into, or I'm artistic, or I'm having a good time with my friends, the number one Instagrammed place last year, any guesses? Disneyland. And you want to know why? Because people want to say something about themselves. It's not so much that they love Disneyland, they want to say, I'm a great parent, I took my kids to Disneyland, or whatever it is. People want to tell their own story, and so it doesn't really matter the format, but from a marketing standpoint, if you want to find ways for it to really spread, you have to give the audience an opportunity to say something about themselves.
Yeah. So I want to talk about it from the film perspective and then the television perspective on producing, and that's product placement, brand integration. I have a question from my driver for the panel from yesterday from the hotel, who's been driving me every morning, and so he knows what's going on.
I love how engaged he is in entertainment marketing.
Oh, he's so engaged. So so this perspective from film, Mike, if you want to chime in on this, and we can talk about from TV. And I asked him, I said, well, he brought up commercials and how much he hates commercials. you know, and how, except for it's a good time to get up and go to the bathroom. That was his thing. And I said, so let me, you know, tell me something here. Does it bother you if you see a brand, a product that's in your entertainment, whether it's film or television, and you know that, you know, you're seeing this guy and he's drinking a Diet Coke, or somebody's, you know, consuming something, and he said, no, I actually love it because if I love the character, I want to possibly do what the character's doing. He said, let me give you an example. I watched something recently and somebody was eating a Snickers bar. He said, I eat Snickers bars. And I could tell he does eat Snickers bars. But in any case, and he said, and another one. And then, you know, this was, if the ride was 8 minutes, if it was longer, we'd still be talking. But he said, another one is Cheerios and cereal. I said, you know, there's a woman that's on my panel that is going to be able to talk about that. But
We represent Cheerios.
yes, yeah, I told him that.
What did he say?
I told him that. He didn't care about your company. He cared about the Cheerios, though. He cared about your client. But in any case,
You want to
Mike,
be gluten-free.
yeah, well, Mike, so from the development and concept process, how much is the scripting and the product placement? I know it's always been there, but how much more in the forefront is it these days?
Well, half of my slate, we're very active in China. So we do a lot of international co-productions, but we've probably produced 4 films that are Chinese co-productions or have a presence in China. That's where I think is the most interesting, because I think, and the rest of the panel will speak a lot more eloquently about this, but that territory and that country is embracing it in a much more aggressive and in a way that can be calculated much more efficiently. Like, I think they're like China and WeChat and the platforms that they use there. They collect this data, and like I don't know if you guys know WeChat, but you buy your tickets there, you can send money. It's Instagram, Facebook, texting, telephone, video conferencing. It's an amazing app. And
Well, and the studios can own the theaters there.
yeah,
Own the
yeah,
screens,
they're
so it's a
completely
whole different.
It's completely unregulated.
Right.
Yeah. No, it is. The Wild West component of it is kind of dying down a little bit. But I think from my perspective, and I do not have a ton of experience in this, because it's still, I feel like China is the most kind of forward thinking on the subject that I've had any experience with. But it's more about the organically weaving this into the narrative so it doesn't stick out. I think we've all seen it where it sticks out like a sore thumb and people will make fun of it that are outside, like, you know, civilians will make fun of it. So I think the challenge is to find ways to find brands that fit the narrative and are more naturally integrated into the story, rather than feeling ham-fisted in any way. And that's my only experience with it, is if somebody's using a computer. We had a movie, a Chinese co-production, and I think it was Asus, I think was the company, and they, you know, all of the computers that we ended up using were branded for this little rescue mission with these computers. And that was something that was completely organic, right? Here's the white hat, the good guys are out there going to save these people, and they're all using the same kind of computer. And there are those kinds of situations. But again, it's not. I'm not. There's always been a conversation about how you can use product placement money to help finance films, which has always
Sure.
been a more interesting conversation
Sure,
for us.
sure.
But I think for me, it's about finding the most natural way to integrate products into the film.
So, and I would answer that it shouldn't be a challenge. So the approach we have is we will work with our producers, our creators, we read the scripts, and we have that conversation. So it shouldn't be a challenge. It should be, hey, we've got 2 cars, here are the character descriptions, we've got tech, we've got, you know, packaged foods, do you have a beer? He's going to be drinking a beer. And it should be as simple as that. And it should be natural, you know, because you can use it as shorthand. And we say that all the time. And we see it when we're on the receiving end. If you're watching a movie and someone pulls up and a character pulls up in a Cadillac or a Hyundai, that cue in one frame is such great shorthand for us in the audience and for you. And so to have that car be, you know, loaned out to you so you don't have to rent them, or have 200 cars Michael Bay to smash them from us for a scene, that's a huge offset for your budget, but also helps you tell your story. And sometimes there are dollars behind that too. I used to get frustrated. I've been doing this a long time. And when I first started out, no one really knew what it was. So imagine that, young people. No one knew what it was. And so I'd go to parties, especially in LA. Who's from LA? Hands up. Yeah, so every time you go to a party, you're like, hey, I'm Caressa. The first thing they say is, what do you do? And I'm like, first thing, man. I'm like, Caressa. So you start saying what you do, and they're like, oh, but I know your work. I'm like, it's not work. Like, I don't have work. And so it would make you feel a little insecure. You're like, well, you know.
And then you said, do you eat Cheerios?
Yeah, well, I was like, I don't know, do you watch Sopranos? Like, he drives our car, you know, Dunkin' Donuts, he drinks our coffee. And they're like, oh, I don't remember that. And you're like, fuck off. Oh, okay. You just feel really, like, stupid, like you didn't know. And
It
so
didn't
now-
make you want to run and buy the
but
product?
yeah, but now I'm at this point where I'm like, actually, that was right, because it shouldn't be like that. And part of my job is, you know, aside from doing the integrations and all that stuff, is to go out to the market and talk to producers and creatives and writers and allay those concerns and the misconception that we're out there forcing you to do something, because it shouldn't be forced. If it's in there, great. And if it's not, we often go and say, hey, we've got a brand. It's a service. It's AARP or something. You've got older characters. Is there anything fun you'd want to do with this? And no is a perfectly good answer. And I say that to our clients. I say it to our producer side. No is a perfectly good answer, because if you're on the verge, you're like, I don't know, and you say yes, it's always going to show up on screen poorly.
George,
Yeah.
I was going to ask George to come in here because, you know, something that I think Hawthorne does is in a very elegant way, move the viewer down the marketing funnel. You know, whether they know they're being moved down the marketing funnel or not. And I think they don't, you know, but there's a transaction there that needs to happen.
We do, and it's like we're also very conscious of where, at what stage in that funnel we deliver that message. And one of the things that, not just from the film perspective or from a integration perspective, is making sure that that message is delivered at the right time with the right frequency. Because what we're now experiencing is that because the consumer has that power to select, it's like want to make sure that it's like you're putting an advertising that is going to appeal to them, that is not going to be intrusive, just as you would not want something in a film that is going to completely take out of a scene. It's like with us, making sure that they don't turn away from that creative, or maybe we change the messaging somewhere down the line in that funnel. It's like that's one of the things and tactics that we utilize to be able to make sure that we integrate and capture that audience at every segment of that funnel.
It's like attention's the commodity.
The funnel? I'm not familiar with that.
The funnel from the perspective of building the awareness, the engagement, the consideration. It's like to actually engage and have that integration with that brand. So for us, it's important to make sure. I'll use an example. If we were to say represent Allstate, we would not put a insurance commercial at the finale of This Is Us. You know, it's like a fire insurance creative, but we'll put it down the line somewhere where it's like that message will actually resonate with the consumer. So that's where data comes in, and data is really important to be able to segment and understand where that customer journey is and how to properly deliver that message
Right.
to them. For the
Yeah,
right
I don't think
frequency.
I was just saying, you know, I don't think we've seen it so in your face as much anymore. You know, I think it's
Right.
been more integrated and there's more seamless integration. I think, you know, brands are appropriately coming together with, you know, filmmakers and being more responsible and more responsive. I remember one time a few years ago, it's probably like 7 or 8 years ago, there was a technology group that we were working with that brought a second screen to be able to, so you're going to, you know, he's showing it to, okay, we're going to watch Sex and the City, and we're going to watch that content. And during the watching of the content, I can pick and choose and pause and say, I want those earrings, I want that blouse, I want that. You know, Warner Brothers was, you know, investing in it and looking to go that route. It never went there, but I think we can do things a lot more appropriately and still get the same response.
I wonder if we didn't go there, though, because we weren't conditioned then, right?
Correct,
So
probably.
back then you weren't. Now I am totally guilty of it.
Yep.
Having screen, and it's, as I said, attention's the new commodity, because we can still be watching a show, but we're doing a bunch of different things. But going back to also seeing brands on screen, you know, we do all sorts of studies, Bill Gates Company, and we did have studies that said that something that's devoid is actually brings out of logos of brands that reflect us, actually bring the audience out of the experience, because it's too Saved by the Bell, it's too Saturday morning, like what's going on. But I do think art does reflect life, and we want to tune in, just as your driver was, seeing the brands that we would use, that we connect with. And yeah, I'm so guilty of buying stuff that I see on screen, and I know the people who probably did it, and I'm like, you're welcome.
I've had a really interesting couple of times over the last year, 2 years, where I'm now dealing with the obstacle because it's so in the headlights, where talent is now coming into the perceived endorsement part of the game. And that's complicated the equation quite a bit for us, where the talent's like, I'm not going to be holding that cup. I'm not going to be pushing that
came
product.
up in the two SAG contracts ago. That actually came up, and it just because they were saying the same thing, and the argument is that it's not the actor, it's the character, right?
Correct.
But it still happens.
Correct, right.
They never resolved it. But,
And the higher the higher grade the talent, the more pull they
Well,
have.
because the talent are the brands, and a lot of times the talent are the consumers. This
But I
is
think
the
it's
blurring of the lines I'm talking about.
I think this illustrates a really great point, though, about being authentic, and also the challenge when you deal with so many decision makers on a film, a TV show. It's not just owner-operator, one person creating it. You need to have it pass the writers, the producers, if there's a network involved, and then the show and tell with the director and the actor. And ultimately, if the actor feels that my character wouldn't be doing that, and they have enough pull, they wouldn't do it. And typically, that's the one that the brands want the most. So,
Could they also have a conflict if they're a brand ambassador for this product?
We typically know that ahead of time, so
You do?
we won't
Okay.
bring that to them. But our job is, the best agent for our brands is to advise them of those things, but also cast a wider net. I think a lot of brands get really stuck on, like, I want this one character on this one show, and I just said there are 571 other shows last year that you could have done. There's more out there, and so you do have to be willing to say no, and also be nimble.
And be able to work with the talent and talk them through what they are comfortable with, and then go back to the brand. You are the negotiator in many ways. You're the middleman that can come in and have to talk to both ends
Right.
and find a great middle ground, because there's always one.
Well, and part of our pretty broad topic of our panel is also to talk about influencers, which I always call me old. I like to think in terms of spokespeople and talent, and that's a whole nother panel and a lot of wine to have that discussion.
Yeah.
Right. But in any case, so I'm thinking about the days, and raise your hand if you remember maybe the panel when a big A-list talent would scoot off to Japan and do a whiskey commercial. We would never see that here, and we could all name people that do that. So I think protecting the brand as the talent is what we're talking about now. But what about the regulations that are coming down for influencers? That now the FTC is cracking down, and we'll see over the next year or so how that evolves. But when influencers, it's been said too many times, one of the Kardashians wakes up in the morning and says, is anybody on Snapchat anymore? And there they go down the tube. So how important is it in the producing process to think about who to attach, who not to attach, when the promotional side can be as important as the actual storyline within the content that you're promoting? Does that make sense? So in other words, beyond the actual piece of content that you're creating, thinking the next step, which is the promotion side, who to attach at that level, which may not be the A-list talent that's actually in the feature.
Well, that points back to using data and knowing who the best partners are for that. I thought Darnell was going to jump in. Did I jump? Because full screen. But no, I think leaving something on screen in that moment could be a miss, because that's just one beat. So you using it more and amplifying it more. I think 100% of our clients' experiences, they want to do more with that moment. We do have a completely huge and growing vertical team of who work with influencers,
Right.
and so that is a big demand and also a great opportunity because you could turn it around so quickly. I think it's the same thing about finding the right partners and being smart about it. I do think that guidelines need to be set in place, but
Well, and what about, I mean, I'm really asking too from the contract side. You know, when you're working with a studio or a production company or whatever it is, and if your end game is to sell it to Netflix or another SVOD or something like that, you know, is there a full disclosure now that's happening in the contract realm that is saying, not only do we have this talent as part of it, but we have these influencers attached? I'm hearing a lot of skittishness out in the market regarding that.
We're actually experiencing that from a marketing and advertising perspective, where it's
Right.
like the influencers are becoming that spokesperson that we
Right.
grew up with, and we're aligning them to that right brand and making sure that it's like they're also going to be telling the right story behind it. And actually, it requires a lot of data and a lot of research behind that influencer
Right.
to make sure that it's like that. In fact, there is going to be nothing that will require to take down a creative if the influencer sends out the wrong message at any given time.
And you're
So there's a
mitigating the
lot of
risk for
research
the
behind it.
client.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
and influencers, I mean, there's, you know, actors, celebrities have been vetted
Right.
in today's world.
Right.
They've been vetted, and they know, hopefully, many of them, what to say, when to say it, and how to say it. Influencers, they're often very young. They're untamed. It can be risky. And we recently were doing a show. We had a co-host, and we wanted to put an influencer in there, and that influencer blew up before we shot. Thank goodness they blew up before we shot.
Before is the key word there.
Yeah, luckily. But it's
Yeah.
but they
like blew up popular or like
Yeah.
No.
Way or
imploded?
just blew up
the bad way.
Imploded.
Like
Imploded.
meltdown.
Imploded.
Woo!
No, imploded. And if we had shot, we would have spent a lot of time having to fix
Right.
what we did.
Right.
Yeah.
And we did background checks. We did everything we were supposed to, but they're untamed.
So it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, I mean,
Let's say.
being on the full screen side and representing a bunch of influencers, I mean, the main difference is that when you look at these actors, they have made a business playing someone else. They've made a business playing a character. And influencers have made a business being themselves. And as you guys have all seen, sometimes, being yourself isn't the prettiest, the most polished.
Oh,
the
come
most
on,
PC.
come on.
And so it is a little bit of you get what you pay for. The reason that they have fans, the reason that someone goes and sees a Denzel Washington film, well, that's probably for a lot of reasons, if you ask my mom, but the reason someone goes sees a Denzel Washington movie is because he's a phenomenal actor, and you know that the type of performance you're going to get. The reason that people follow these influencers is for who they are, and it's hard to separate those two sometimes, and so that is the slippery slope.
Yeah.
But I would say they're doing a great job at it. So if you give them your brand brief and you share the guidelines of like, hey, this would make us, this is no, this is yes, they would tell it in a way that's going to connect with their audience.
Well, those are the times that
Yeah.
it works, when you can find the
Yeah.
perfect match, when you can find something that's authentic to their personal brand already and allows them to still be themselves, and that aligns well with the brand, the movie, the product.
Yeah, I
when they're
think it-
connected to people like you guys who can help keep them on track.
Yeah.
So many of them.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think so many of them see the opportunity to partner with brands, and so I think they know.
How to behave.
Yeah. How to.
Do you think the
behave.
audience is turned off now, less engaged, let's say, when they now see the disclosure on Insta that says, whatever, however they word it
I don't
for
know. She's
their.
got an opinion. Audience member, hand it.
I don't
'Cause-
think so. I think that the audience kind of trusts the influencer, and they only incorporate brands that are in line with who they are. I have actually a digital agent, so I represent influencers. So I work with full screen all the time, but I've never had a bad impression of that.
And when you do, I mean, the ones that sell out get called out really quickly, and those are usually the ones that aren't popular. The ones that are smart about saying and protecting their own personal brands are usually the ones that end up are the ones that actually get brand deals, and the ones that grow a following because they're true to who they are.
Right.
And when in film and TV, when you're working with producers, I think it's no different than or below the line crew who are using our products. It's the same thing with influencers. I've seen from my counterparts on that side of our business. they want long-term relationships. So we, I don't know anyone in our business who really wants to screw us over by drinking and driving with Heineken, never working with us again on the next project. So I think
Right.
it would be the same thing. There is goodwill out there, and we only hear about the few that are bad.
Yeah,
but
but
I would
when
say,
they're bad, they
but no,
can be
I don't know.
really
In the
bad.
last year of Hollywood, there
Yeah.
are a lot of bad going on.
Yeah,
So
There is, but when you do find a good one, and you place your digital media within those influencer channels,
Right.
it's like the response on that is strong.
Yeah,
We've had
absolutely.
that, we've had
Loyalty,
that
and that loyalty
experience.
is very,
That
very
goes back to
strong.
authenticity.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
they are authentic.
Yeah, we
They-
use a lot of influencers for unboxings, and we've found, probably a dozen that we continue
British
to go
gal
to.
you
Yeah,
got,
yeah,
she's
she's
amazing,
great.
yeah.
And they recognize what they're doing. I also think there's been a certain amount of professionalism in the last several years. People have become really savvy about being an influencer, and as you said, protecting the brand. We did a really cool campaign with a movie called Ingrid Goes West, which is kind of around social media, and we used a ton of influencers. We kind of gambled because it was a really fast campaign. So we had screenings in New York and LA, and we brought influencers. We acted fastly, and it was very successful. So it was a little risky. We didn't use any data to see if they're going to work. We just went for it, and off we went.
qualitative programs, though, are really smart for tune-in.
Yeah.
The challenge for producers who there's so much content out there, Netflix isn't going to market every single project out there. But I think if you're trying to tap into a 13 to 30-year-old, they don't have cable, they don't pay attention to outdoor, they're not reading magazines, but where are they? They're in digital. So by using their favorite influencers to drive tune-in campaigns to that show or that movie, like what you did with Net Deadpool, I think that's only going to increase, and I think it's super smart.
By the way, California just came out. The sun. Just want to say.
Okay, so thank you for the weather. All right, so let's open it up. Round of applause here. I'm going to vote. I think I've had the best, the smartest, the most fabulous panel of all of you. Okay, so just had to put that in there. Aren't they great? All right, so questions. We've got about 10, 15 minutes, so really, this is your chance. Pick the brains here. Go ahead.
So I do have a question.
And if you would say your name and who you're with.
My name is Cynthia, and I'm a content marketer. And I was wondering about influencers using their influence for social good. Like, for example, if they are a Musical.ly star, helping to empower kids to be more authentic themselves and not try to like them. Rebecca had said on another panel, that kids like her so that people will like them for liking her. And also for social causes. There's a lot of reasons out there. There's plenty of people with their hands out who need it. Because there's a humanization that comes with social causes with them being real people. So I was just curious if any of your influencers do that.
I'm going to jump in and say one thing, and then whoever wants to take this. In Texas, we just did for the American Heart Association a red sofa tour, where we had a red sofa and we took it around to different prominent buildings with the city manager and the governor, and then to other more commercial areas. And we deployed a bunch of influencers with that, and we really cast them. It was sort of a casting process that we did about them, and it was a wide range of ages about who had been touched with heart disease. This was all women-centric, who had been touched by heart disease. Clearly a lot of it wasn't themselves, but maybe it was their sister or their mom or their grandmommy or whatever it was, and it was wildly successful. And it was strictly based on cause-related. We had big success with it. Anybody else?
We absolutely do the same thing. A cause is, we treat it like a brand. So we have causes, charities that we work with, like the Wounded Warrior Project. And again, it's tapping into that audience, and they're not watching TV. So where are they? They're with influencers. So I think there's a ton of cause-related efforts going on though with social and influencers, and lots of companies out there I've encountered at conferences.
Yeah, I mean more about like teens who are the ones who are adopters of this, to be able to use it for social good.
Yeah, I'm actually going to turn it on its heel a little bit and say that we're working with a woman right now who's in her 60s and is an influencer, and who started her business, or what she does, she started it with the cause. and the cause made her the influencer. So you know, to put something out there for everybody, it's influencers don't necessarily need to be that youth market centric person. There are a lot of people out there who speak to a lot of different audiences because the use of digital and short form and Insta is now being used by people over.
It's funny you say that, because yes, if you've been around a while, we've called celebrities were influencers, or you know, anyone in town get into a club were influencers. And we recently did something on a round table with a very prolific female producer creator, and in the office they were talking about bringing, we're going to have influencers there, and the conversation was like women around the world that have made a difference as influential people. And there's a whole contingency in the kitchen that thought, like, we're just going to get a bunch of women influencers. They all thought they were Instagrammers, you know. So it was
Instead of
funny.
influential.
I'm like, no, Shonda Rhimes doesn't need Instagrammers, you know. But that's what it is. So you know, but it was funny just the terminology.
Right.
Yeah. Questions? Yes, sir.
My name is Edwin Stepp. I have a small production company, produce mostly documentaries, but working on some web series now, a couple of feature films. But I'm wondering what your experience has been with brands becoming content creators themselves. Like Red Bull is they've been doing it for many years. I've been reading there are more brands who want to create their own content. They've not been very good at it in the past so much because it isn't authentic a lot of times. But what's happening in that realm? Are you finding brands doing
I think I mean, that's a huge awakening, partly due to things like, I think 12,000 small businesses went out, brick and mortar, out of business last year. We're going to see a lot more, so brands are really savvy right now. We're working, predominantly we work with the studios and streaming companies, but we're starting to work with more brands in that because they're really getting aware of how to talk to the people that want to be part of what they're doing. So we're going to see a lot more change in that. It's going to be a big shift, and you're right, a lot of them, even big brands that are online brands still don't really know how to market themselves, so they're turning to companies like us and say, hey, give us the flash and appeal that you do for big films and TV shows, etc. So I think there's going to be a big change in the coming years. We're going to see a lot more of that. So
This year alone, we've done 4 straight brand pieces, actual programming content. 4 brands straight from brand, no agencies. Straight, yep, big brands.
And major brands out there too are also recognizing that this is a gateway to launch their brand, to find that audience and identify who that audience is before they move into other channels of awareness. And so what we've seen, it's like with major brands, is longer creative that consumers then find, and at that point it becomes a viral campaign.
For documentarians in this space, I think there's a big opportunity for longer form content to connect with brands, to tell stories that have a halo effect about the brand. It's not all about the brand like a commercial.
Yeah,
so I think that Moonshot, which Google did a few years back with the Joshuas, I thought was brilliant because it was a compelling story. And from our clients, we lean into a few of those examples. To show them what's next. We have clients like Dyson. Dyson's not just about selling vacuums. They're about environmental control and all sorts of innovation, but they have an opportunity that they could partner. And we've tried to get them to go down this road, and I think clients are starting to recognize that's a new way to tell a story than just integration.
And isn't his wife is very big on social causes as well?
That also, Bill Gates too, both of those guys.
I think another good example of this, REI did a campaign, the outdoor company, really Outfitters, did a campaign on women, sort of like women in the woods, but all about, which was, I don't know if you've seen it. If you haven't, you should look at it. I have no connection to REI other than I like it. But I mean, it was beautifully done in a very almost documentary style.
Yeah, they did great. Another great brand I like to follow that's doing great thing is Shinola. If anybody knows the watch, fantastic. Go to their website. And they're cause oriented. The founder owner, who used to be Fossil, is doing fantastic things in Detroit. So love that integration.
And my advice to content creators is create and build relationships with agencies who represent these brands, because agencies are always looking for. It's a hard door to get through. It's very hard to get through, but it's an important one if you can, and just one. That's all you need. Right. And once you get through, and you can bring your content creation abilities and capabilities to an agency, and you can give them something in a long form that they're not used to, big impact.
And,
yeah,
and from the
absolutely.
agency perspective, it's like we're looking for that new way of introducing, it's like that brand into the space. So if it comes in the form of a social video or their own channel, I think that is really the overall strategy moving forward.
Mike, you were going to add?
Yeah, this is just because this is such an education for me. This is like the best education for me. I just do chicken.
So glad
I
you
don't
could
really
join
know
us
anything
today.
other than we make chicken. I don't do hamburgers. We do one thing. This is like the best. I'm like just soaking this in. Like, make sure I have everybody's emails after.
May I give you some popcorn?
Yeah, no, I should be on that. I really should be out there. I would say that one of the best experiences I've had that speaks to this is where I'm friendly with the producers that did Lion. And when they shared, they told me the story of, they shared the Google short film about the true story. And they're like, this is the next film we're doing. And I watched that short film, and I shared that short film with probably 50 people. And to see how they honored that, and is there any better kind of advertisement or commercial for Google than that short film on the power of what they've created?
But it was a story, you know,
It
and I
was
think
a
that's
s-
what brands really have to be careful of, because that they're not doing a 45-minute commercial.
Yeah,
you know?
but it was
Yeah.
a story. But it was a story that was so fantastic in its scope, and it utilized their technology in a way that was relatable.
Yeah.
And the fact that the feature would, turn out as good as it did, it was like it all started with this short film that was out there, and yeah, I just think that's.
It's a really good example. We have just a couple more minutes. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Julian. I have a company called June Buck Pictures, and I want to say thank you very much. This has been a really stimulating panel. This kind of goes back to something that Mike touched on, and it might not be the best place to talk about it, but I'd certainly like to take it offline. It's something as a writer-producer, we're always looking creative ways for financing. And so when you talk about product placement and leveraging product placement to then help finance films, do you have a lot of experience with that, or are you seeing that happen? I mean, can you speak to that a little bit?
I'm probably not the best person on this panel. The ones I know about are probably so old, and they're like it's very anecdotal in that I remember Dove did a film, a series like that, and I remember. I mean, I look at this guy that's Gas Monkey, like that guy Richard Rawlings, like the empire that he's created, utilizing all these different brands, whether it's Miller or Dodge, and how he's done that. But I've seen it, but I've just seen it in really anecdotal ways. We've never been approached. I know a couple of people that are in this space that create content that go to Land Rover and they do these documentaries, but they're kind of integrating these car brands into content. But all the ones I know I don't know, we've never been approached in that way.
Do you think if you were approached, you would entertain it or do it?
I mean, it is, I'm financing independent films. I deal with like all kinds of characters and anything from from wealthy families that want to support their family members that want to enter the industry to equity financiers that are more cause-driven. The film I just finished is called Hotel Mumbai. That's about the siege on the Taj Hotel in 2008, and that's a film that I want to talk to everyone about because it's incredibly challenging material, but important and timely in the kind of in our current environment. So we would be open to anything, and any opportunity that made sense.
Okay, so we're going to wrap it up here. I'm just going to ask the panelists just for one thing. We might have just heard Mike's, but for one project, I know it's like Sophie's choice here, but so one project that you're working on right now that you think is incredibly breakthrough, innovative, and exciting. That you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to work on that today. And you don't have to say what the brand is if you don't, or go ahead, but maybe there's something about it that's really compelling?
We have I mean, I don't know if it's groundbreaking, but it's really fun for us. It's kind of a little bit of an emerging vertical for us because it's gaming, it's mobile gaming. So there's a company called Cybo, and there's a game called Subway Surfers, and we have a big activation at Venice Beach on June 1st. And we're doing a lot of cool things around print and social and experiential and AR. So, and it's a whole immersive thing.
Okay, and
on
what's the
Venice
name
Beach.
of it again?
Well, the company's called Cybo, and the game is called Subway Surfers.
Okay.
And very popular game. If anybody
Okay.
knows it and plays it, let me know.
Awesome. Chuck?
It was what we talked about a little bit earlier. We're working with a woman who has put together her own. It's pretty amazing what she's done. It's called Free the Shelters, and she goes to animal shelters, and she announces on local television networks. She goes to them and she says, on this weekend there are 300 animals in this shelter, and we want to completely clear that shelter, and I will personally pay all the adoption fees and all the immunization fees. And she's now at a 98% rate on freeing these shelters. I took that and her brand. She is a beauty product owner, and she runs a beauty brand, and that's what helps inspire her passion. I took that, turned it into a television program. And so we're out shopping right now. It looks like we've got a couple of potential buyers to take that and turn it into a 22 episode where we follow the journey of these adopted pets on their way to their
Wow.
new home.
Awesome. What's it? Tell our audience the name again so they can
It's called
find
Free
it.
the Shelters.
Awesome. Caressa?
That's so feel good.
And Caressa's going to talk about Cheerio.
Every day. Every day is the best day. This is the best job. If they say, what is it? It's not work if you love what you do, or something like that. I mean, 20-something years ago, on my very first day, I was given a couple weeks by a really tough boss to get results on screen, and any producer in the room knows that nothing airs under a month. And I did it, and I loved it. And I was like, I never want to do anything different than this. And the fun is that you're always on a hunt. So we represent the brands. So right now, I represent, 40 brands, and we work with all these great shows, so you're constantly hunting, and then when you make the match, it's so exciting. And then
So
when
your
it airs,
project is called Adrenaline.
it's called Ben. Yeah, it is. It probably is. I could never be a teacher, because I couldn't wait 20 years to see my results. But thank you, teachers in the room.
Is George?
Yeah.
It's a different type of storytelling. For us, it's more from the perspective of data and what kind of story we can build out of data. Right now, we're in the midst of building a product that is going to look at audience responsiveness. It's like not just from the audience delivery, but how people respond, but it's also going back to that initial root of how much can an influencer impact that brand? How much can a creative content impact that result, all the way through from those three stages of the funnel that I mentioned earlier, from the awareness, engagement, and then awareness.
It's exciting.
So we're going through all of those processes right now to understand that.
So stay tuned.
So it's a different storytelling.
Yeah. Darnell?
We're working on a project right now with AT&T called Hello Lab. We'll be in the second season of that, and that pairs prominent actors and filmmakers and artists with kind of emerging artists in a mentorship way. We're actually sharing some of that at Cannes later next week, but people like Octavia Spencer and Common and others come alongside these kind of aspiring and emerging young people who have great stories to tell, and that's been a really cool project to be a part
And
of.
it's called ATT Labs?
AT&T Hello Lab.
Hello Lab. Got it. And Mike?
Well, I think I already said it, but
Yeah.
it's finding more projects like Hotel Mumbai that both work commercially in a very accessible way, but also kind of tackle more difficult and challenging subjects that are important to us. So I love finding films that have a social action component to them, because I think it's just a way to reach the broadest audience and kind of inform the dialogue.
And
And
with
just
one
to
addendum?
come full circle, the Free the Shelters project is all 22 episodes will be fully paid for by a brand.
Oh, good.
So
That's the circle, guys.
All right, I think that's an awesome ending point. Thank you for that. All right, everybody, big round. Kick-ass panel.
Wait, what about a round for the moderator? All right.
Enjoy your other panels.
Thank you for feeling me back up. No, I'm just kidding.